Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Dad at Arms channel. I'm your host, Colt, the Dad at Arms. And with me today, I have a very cool guest. This is Barrie Gower. Yeah, and I'm going to let him introduce himself because he's cool. So go ahead, Barrie.
Thank you, Colt. Lovely to meet you, Colt. Hello, everyone. Colt said, my name's Barrie. I'm a prosthetics designer. I'm based here in the UK, in London. We're in the middle of a heat wave. It's about 90 odd degrees outside, so I'll probably melt during this interview. But I've been making monsters and sticking rubber on people for about 30 years now. I graduated from college about 1996 and I started working at the BBC and sort of networked and worked for an awful lot of people since then as a self-employed prosthetics artist. I worked on the Harry Potter films for 10 years, various other films like Saving Private Ryan and Gladiator, and then I met my wife on a film in Budapest in Hungary in 2007, and Sarah was working for the visual effects department, the CGI department on that film, and we got together and we had a daughter 2 years later, and then we started our own company about 2 years later, which is about 2011, something like that. We started our own company, and we had a few little jobs, and then our first main gig was Game of Thrones, where we started
Awesome.
in 2013 on season 4. And that was really the start of our little fledgling company. And then cut to how many years later, we've just done the makeup effects for Master of the Universe.
Awesome. That's cool. Listening to you name drop a bunch of some of my favorite things that you've worked on is really cool. Obviously I grew up, I didn't necessarily grow up with Harry Potter books, but they were definitely in my realm. I read them. They kind of came out right as I was finishing up high school, going into college. And so I read them, and then the movies came out and they were fun to watch. But I mean, Saving Private Ryan, that was a favorite movie of my dad's. He was served in the army and everything like that. And so he was a big war buff. And so we watched that. Anytime my mom would be out of town, my dad would put on the R-rated war epic movies. And that's how I saw Gladiator as well. So
really? Wow.
Yeah.
I did a spate of war movies, actually. I did the Saving Private Ryan, and then I did a First World War movie, I think, at the time, Gladiator, and then lots of sword and sandal films as well. I worked on Troy, Wolfgang Peterson film with Brad Pitt and Eric Bana. My wife worked on that film as well, but she was in the visual effects department, and we never met at that point. But yeah, there's definitely a spree of films, a fad of films at a time. So who knows? Maybe there'll be very similar massive films, which will be happening in a few years, but we shall see.
Oh, that's awesome. What is the name of the company that you and your wife started?
It's very original. It's BGFX.
BGFX.
I think we founded it 2010, and I actually started off. I was still working. I think I was on the last Harry Potter, but I was working for various makeup designers as well, and doing little projects from a workshop I had at home in my garage. And I hired a couple of friends, and I do 1 or 2 makeups for a film or TV show. I did like Life of Pi, a few other sort of TV shows as well. And then I worked for a friend on a Edgar Wright movie called The World's End, and I was doing prosthetics on that. And I got to meet a makeup designer Jane Walker, who then got approached about doing Game of Thrones about a year or 2 later. Because I'd worked quite closely with Jane on set. She actually rang me up about another job prior to that to do a little beaten up makeup, I think, for something. And then she rang me up and said, I've been hired as a new makeup designer, and I think they might be looking to get a new prosthetics designer at the time. And you want me to put your name in the mix? So she did, and we went for the interview. And Sarah and I were like, we'd never been for an interview of anything of that scale or size. And we were like, what we got to lose? Let's do it. It'll be good practice. And then about a week later, we got the call to say we had the gig, and we were like, amazing. Got off the phone. Oh my God, we haven't got a workshop. We haven't got a crew. We haven't got any tables or chairs. We haven't got anything. So we kind of built it from the ground up in about 3 or 4 weeks and started hiring a team. And it was exactly the same time that Guardians of the Galaxy had just started the build in the UK. And a lot of prosthetic artists had gone onto that. And there was a couple of other big films at the time which had eaten up a lot of really good prosthetic artists. So I was calling old friends and asking for favors and just trying to get a really good core little team together. And it's fascinating because we probably had about 15, 20 people. And some of those people who joined us on that first project, about 13, 14 years ago, are still with us today. So, and they're part of our core team. So, and our team kind of fluctuates up and down. From an average size team is probably about 20 people, 20 to 30 people. And then it can really peak when we get on larger projects. So we do the Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings TV show for Amazon, and we peaked at about just over 100 people on season 2. Masters of the Universe, our workshop team and our on-set team, we probably got close to about 70 people maybe for Masters of the Universe. And these are very specialized artists which specialize in different departments, be it sculpture or painting or hair work or mold making or casting the prosthetics themselves, so that we've got a lot of very skilled, talented artists. So it's kind of like working at art school here. We say our crew's made up of basically a load of very talented art school dropouts. So we're incredibly lucky to be surrounded by the talented folk that we have here.
Oh, that's incredible. I'm really excited. You mentioned that you worked on the At World's End movie. My wife and I have been huge fans of that trilogy of movies, the Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and At World's End for years, and we just started showing our boys. They're teenagers now, so we started kind of introducing them to a few things. And the next on the list is At World's End, and so now it'll be fun to watch that, having talked to you. That's really neat. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I made up an actor called Martin Freeman, and I don't want to spoil. Have you seen the film at all?
I have. Yeah, I've seen it a few times.
Yeah, I did like a football head for him, where he gets his head smashed at the end, and he shoves like a football into his head.
That's awesome.
Noses for people and things, but and then we worked with Edgar Wright a few years ago. We did Last Night in Soho with him.
Okay.
We had a bunch of kind of prosthetics for a load of characters which had like eyes and mouths missing, and there were sort of digital effects as well. It's a bit of an augmentation between practical and digital. So, but that was a really fun film to work on with Edgar, who I think is the most incredible filmmaker. He really is. And he's at the heart of it, he's a fanboy like the rest of us. So he's a really lovely guy to talk to as well.
That's awesome. And I love when people like that, when they're kind of their passion for things shine through in their product, and you can definitely tell there's a loving hand at the helm. So that's really cool.
Which it is, I don't want to jump too prematurely, but that's a really good segue into Travis Knight.
Absolutely.
Is so passionate about the Masters of the Universe world, and I think it's very interesting, having had a career working with a lot of different filmmakers, directors, and showrunners, and it's a real mix of personalities and talent and passion. And Travis, I think we already shared this kind of shorthand of passion with practical makeups and effects because of Travis's history with Leica and his stop motion company. And I was already a big fan of his films. I have a 15-year-old daughter, Lottie, who loves like Kubo and the Two Strings and Coraline and Missing Link. We love Bumblebee as well. But his stop frame animation films are just absolutely gorgeous. I mean, there's
Yeah.
such beautiful works of art. So I think when I first met Travis, there was already this lovely understanding of what we did. He knew all the materials and the processes that we used, and he was his head was so screwed on with all the characters of the movie of
Hmm.
what he wanted to try and achieve practically or digitally or a bit of a marriage of the two. So it's kind of how we started really was with a compendium and a list of all the characters, and we went through one by one, and it was ourselves, the production designer, Guy Hendricks Dias, costume designer Richard Sale, and VFX producer and the VFX department. And I think we just went through each character to establish how are we going to bring these to life. And it was interesting that Travis did not hold back where he felt we wouldn't be able to achieve something practically. It's definitely the way to go would be digital. But it's interesting because we'd actually been talking to the producer Bill Bannerman of Master of the Universe for about 7 years. He approached us pre-COVID. I was on location. I was in Norway on the last James Bond film, and I had a call, had a Zoom with him. And at the time, I think it was with Sony, and it was with the Nee brothers were going to direct it,
Yeah.
and they'd written the script. And we got sent concept art and photos of busts and things, and it was a very different movie, and the aesthetic of it was very different as well back then. Um, and it was a very state of the art, cutting edge sort of approach to the characters and their design and the armor and the costume, and it was all very, I don't want to say Marvel-esque, but it was very high tech. And
Okay.
I mean, it was gorgeous. The work they'd done was absolutely stunning, but it was very different to this iteration that we've now done. So, but the film went away, and it came back a year or so later, and we were going to do it, and it moved studio, and it disappeared again, and then it came back, and it changed studio, and we couldn't do it, and we gave the producers a list of candidates who possibly could do it, and then I think it went to the States, and then it might have been Australia, and it disappeared, and then it came back, and finally our schedule it kind of lined up that it looked like we'd be able to jump on board. And my wife Sarah and I were kind of like, well, this is a sign. It keeps coming back. I think it's meant to be. We need to do this movie, which is obviously a bit of a no-brainer anyway, because I'm 100% the correct age, and I
Yes.
grew up with He-Man and Masters of the Universe, and I idolized the action figures. I did, and it's not so long ago actually. We've got storage near our house here in London, which my mum passed away a few years ago. She lived in the north of England, and we cleared out, which was my childhood home as well, and we cleared out a loft and all the cupboards and everything, and a lot of things we put into storage, and sort of week by week we go through several boxes about, should we put stuff on eBay, should we recycle, what should we do. And I came across all my old Star Wars toys. I was like, oh my god, all my Star Wars figures and everything. And then I just came across this box and opened the lid, and there was Whiplash sort of sitting at the top Orco, and it's like, oh my god. And I got all my figures out, and I mean, I didn't have a complete collection, but I had about 25 figures, I think. And it was just like everything came flooding back, and it's like I remember my first figure my mum bought me, and it was when we lived in Chester, in near Wales, and we went into this department store, and it was not long after the toy line came out, and I didn't go for He-Man or Skeletor first. I remember I went for Buzz-Off. He was my
Nice.
first character, and I think it was just like the colors and his kind of goggles and his wings and everything. And yeah, I mean, I love the scale of the characters as well. I think they were just a little bit, there was something aesthetically more pleasing about other action figures. Um, yeah, I mean, I obviously, I grew up with He-Man, and I loved the cartoon, and I really enjoyed the '87 film, to be honest.
Mhm.
I did think at the time, this is not Masters of the Universe, but I loved it. Um, so cut to 40 odd years later, to get the opportunity to be part of this it's insane. It really is. I mean, it's a huge privilege and an honor, to be trusted by Travis and the producers and Mattel to help bring these guys to life. And they are like 6 foot, action figures.
Yeah,
That's how we kind of approached it all.
that's amazing. I think I can speak for many fans out there, many people who've seen the movie, that the look of the film, like, and just the characters and everything like that, you guys nailed it. I think everything looks great. It's one of those brands that just has so many cool looking weirdos in the lineup of characters, that it's always, everybody has their favorite. And it's just, for me, it was so fun to finally see it kind of realized in that way, to where they look like they did when we were kids playing with the toys, and they're immediately recognizable for who they are. And so, well
I
done.
think it's interesting because I think in the original iteration when we were approached about it, it was quite a departure from. I think it was quite different to the '80s toy line, and I think I'm so pleased that Travis was headlong on. We've got the designs there. We've got the IP there. It's like this is the film I want to make. And Skeletor was quite a big contrast in what we originally approached about and what we ended up doing. And Travis was very much like, it's a talking skull. That's what Skeletor is. It's a talking skull, and he's muscular and he's blue.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what more do you want to know? There's the design. So it's again that was a really good sort of testament to his judgment as how we would approach this. And I think Travis was 100% correct in the fact that we should not have been trying to do a prosthetic makeup as they did with the '87 film over Leto, and it should be a digital animated skull. So it was great the fact that we actually, I mean, we were able to design with Travis and Guy in the art department, and we modeled skull actually in modeling clay. It was all old school procedures, and we sculpted it in modeling clay. We did a 3D scan of it, we 3D printed it, and then we artworked it up to look like the skull that Skeletor has. We had it on a pole, and then the guys in VFX could then use that as lighting and texture reference on the day.
Okay.
And then the suit, the body was sculpted over a 3D print of Jared, and he's already toned and really ripped. So we were able to but he wasn't quite the scale, obviously, of Skeletor. But we were able to use all that information and just enhance it all, and then really carve into it and get beautiful tight returns and muscle structure and fibrous sinews and all
Yeah.
sort of detail.
I'm going to bring up, just to give everybody kind of a visual comparison, I'm going to bring up your Instagram page, if that's okay, that kind of has some of these images and stuff on there while you're talking. So, yeah, here we go with the bodysuit, and you said this was the kind of that molded prosthetic.
Yeah.
Actor.
So this comprises of it's like a foam latex suit, which is an upper body and lower legs, and we were able to dress Jared in this fairly quickly. Actually, I mean, this is like he had a skin tight layer which went on first, which had magnets attached to it in certain areas.
Okay.
And then attachment points through this foam latex suit. So once he put the suit on, the costume elements like that large collar would go on, and then the gauntlets and things would go on, and they would connect via magnets through the suit. So everything moved correctly and nothing would slide off or go asymmetrical, what have you. But to get him, I think, into his suit and dressed head to toe with the costume department, we had two artists, Charlotte Haldane and Alan Murphy, who looked after Jared day to day, who worked closely with Richard Sell's costume department, and they were able to get him in his foam suit and his costume probably in about 45 minutes, something like that. But there were days where he also had a foam latex collar and cowl, which would go on, so we would actually see his blue, fibrous, muscular tendony neck. That would anchor onto the suit. Some days we'd adhere that with glue if we had any concerns with buckling for close-ups and things. And then we'd also occasionally adhere the wrists, the ankles, and then he had silicone gloves, which were sculpted over slightly reduced versions of Jared's hands. So they were really, really skin tight and moved very nicely with his hands. And then we had silicone prosthetic appliances for his feet, which we used a couple of times. We had one scene with the Pig Boy character who came into his chambers, helped him off his bed, and we did actually shoot a scene where I think Pig Boy was helping him on with his boots, so we wanted close to his feet. So he's a real mix of kind of sculpted foam rubber suits and appliances as well. So it's a little bit of a nice amalgamation of processes. And then there's the skull that's a 3D print that we artworked and gave to VFX. So I mean, he was a challenge, I think, Skeletor. I mean, I think out of all the characters, we did a lot of research and development, and we did maquettes. We did sculpted maquettes, which we then 3D printed, and we did all the artwork, pre-artwork, so we could get all the paintwork signed off. The actual body sculpture was something which we got to the finish point fairly quickly. The art finishing, the artwork, it's a very intrinsic paint job, which is done with a mix of inks and solvents, which was headed by, we had an incredible artist called Joel Hall, which painted a lot of this, and then he had a team beneath him, which worked alongside Joel to do, because we had various duplicate suits as well. We had an artist, Amy Aspden, who worked very closely with Joel. So I think we did something like about 6 duplicate suits in total. We had about 3 or 4 for Jared, and then we had 2 or 3 for a stunt performer called Cena, who did all the very physical stunt work, all the fighting and being hurled across the room on wires. And so it's quite a combination. But I mean, Jared was obviously there. He did all the physical acting and all the interaction with He-Man and the main cast, with Nicholas. And obviously all the dialogue. So, I mean, Jared was 100% present there all the time. And then Cena would step in and do, I don't think producers were very fond on hurling Jared Leto 80 foot across the stage. So it was good that, fortunately, Cena was of a very similar frame to Jared. So everything fit him really, really well.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, he was a great character to be involved with.
And I know you mentioned it. I just love all those details on the bodysuit with, you said like the sinewy kind of effect showing through, and you can see like around the knees, like the bone kind of, I don't know. It just looks really cool. I just love that attention to detail. And those feet and hands just look so gross. I love it.
It's interesting because it's obviously a mix of materials here, but that's something we do quite often where we used foam rubber for the suit, which is very lightweight and spongy. And the reason we used it for the suit is if we made it out of silicone, it'd be very, very heavy, non-porous, and it would really weigh Jared down and make it very difficult for him to perform. So it's quite common that we would use silicone for the hands because the elasticity and the movement is very good with silicone. The same with the appliances for the feet. But our team quite often has to tie various materials together so they look uniformed and they look been made out of the same product. But with foam latex, it's a white aerated foam that we basically have all the components, put them in a big food mixer and whisk everything up, and it kind of it volumizes. Then we inject it into a mold, bake it in an oven. But when it comes out, it is a white opaque foam. It's like an upholstery foam, and you have to approach the painting techniques quite differently to silicone because that has it can have a translucent nature. So we have to build up the paint job in washes and washes and layers of all these different intrinsic sort of washes of color. And we use airbrushing, we use paint brushes, we use sponges and all kinds of different tools to do it. So it was quite a head scratch getting that semi-translucent turquoise hue with all the muscle definition, highlight and shadow, popping out the veins and all those sinews. So I think a suit to paint from start to finish probably took our team a good week to paint it,
Wow.
and we had about 6 duplicates. Um, it would take several weeks to get those all artworks, and then we would have a team refurbing them. We'd get tears. We'd have the paint would wear in certain areas where costume had rubbed over the top of it. So we were always maintaining the suit throughout the whole shoot. So it was quite a challenge.
Oh, that's just so cool. Um, I'll throw pictures up as we go along um, with the conversation. But in addition to Skeletor, what other, we've got a lot of characters in this movie, and I know some of them are motion capture. I know Beastman was a lot of motion capture. Was there any with Beastman specifically? Was there any prosthetics for that character that were made it into the film or that you guys made, or was that all motion capture?
I mean, funnily enough, when we first approached about the film, however many years ago, the one character they were adamant was going to be practical, fully practical, was Beastman, and they
Okay.
wanted a large performer, and they wanted us to do a head-to-toe creature suit, and they didn't want to do any digital work on him at all. Um, and Skeletor was 100% practical at the time as well. They wanted a golden skull, a
I remember
golden,
reading about that. Yeah.
and then it was going to be a disfigured makeup beneath. I'm really pleased we went the route we have. Um,
Me too.
but with Beastman, it was um, similar to Skeletor, as even if things were going to be created completely digitally, we helped the VFX team out quite a lot, and so we sculpted a large bust, head and shoulders of Beastman in modeling clay, and we didn't even scan it. We just gave it to VFX. I think they scanned it and they used it as a digital asset for their team to recreate Beastman. But that was really fun being part of the design process for Beastman, and it's pretty similar actually to what we did. So it's not always that common that you get to work on a film and you've got so many characters and the end result is pretty much what you shot, or sometimes things can be painted over or replaced in post production. So for us, it was just incredible that all of our work was seen. It's still there, and Travis was happy with everything, and it was all utilized to its full extent. So yeah, it's good. But as you say, I think we had about 8 to 10 sort of hero prosthetic characters, which played quite a lot, and each of which were their own set of challenges and completely different approaches. Each one was everything was prototype. There was a lot of stuff on this film that we'd never really done before as a department, and I think we were one of the last makeup effects companies, especially in England, to kind of jump on the digital wagon of getting 3D scanners, 3D printers, and then just using those in our every day-to-day workflow now. It's like there isn't a day that goes by where we're not building something we don't use 3D printers, or we're not scanning our physical sculptures and manipulating things and doing this, that, and the other. So this was the first show that we really utilized a lot of 3D work. But everything's practical that we make, and we use a lot of old school techniques as well. We still sculpt everything in clay. We still make practical molds. We use a variety of different materials like silicone, foam, latex. And we've done a lot of hair work as well on this project, which is a department we usually work alongside a hair and makeup department, hair and makeup designers. And say we'll do a prosthetic character which has hair. If it's a wig, it's usually the hair designer which will design the hair. And we had so many big characters that had a lot of hair work on them. They had to tie in tandem with the prosthetics. So we took that all under our own banner, really. and we have an incredible hair supervisor called Chloe Mouton Phillips, who, again, Chloe's worked with us probably for about 10 years. She was with us on Game of Thrones, but she really excels in hair work, and she's got a really good knowledge and understanding of all the different disciplines. And that's something, we really utilized when we did characters like, I mean, Mossman was one of a big character for us, even though he doesn't play greatly in the film. He's in a handful of scenes. We shot a couple of things which didn't make it to the final edit with him, but we kind of went all out for him, and he was a real areas. Stephen Denton, the actor, but he, to actually create his foam. It was a foam upper body appliance, and to get the marriage of materials to create that mossy texture was a mix of flocking, which is something that's used. You can flock toys, so it's a very fine fibrous hair. So we flocked onto the skin. We used hair punching, which was hair, which is manually inserted hair by hair. We had little lace hair pieces that were knotted. We had fake foliage moss that was made out of different materials, plastics, rubbers, and woolen materials. And we had real mossy products as well. We used reindeer moss, which is this beautiful kind of Scandinavian kind of moss, which comes in a variety of colors. But all these different materials we had to dye so that they all had the same hue to them, and we had highlights and shadows in there as well. But it was kind of designed in a way that it was built up in layers, and we used one material to do a base layer, then something laid over the top of it, then something over the top of that, and we would then go in and artwork stuff, and then we would sew other things into it and have little hair pieces which were groomed and were combed in a certain direction. And together with the facial makeup, which was silicone appliances and a foam cowl and a foam neck piece, which was all, we had hand-laid hair, we had hair punching, we had little lace pieces again, we had foliage, which was kind of glued to the skin. And then we had a hand-knotted wig, which was made for him, and then little lace eyebrows and hair punching around the hairline. It was a mammoth task, this was, to actually create that kind of, you can't really see where one material starts and one stops, one starts. So it was he literally was a beast to do this character, and of course he's got contact lenses, he's got dentures, he's got silicone gloves. We worked very closely with the costume department to get all those mossy kind of moldy textures and colors. We had to make sure we were using the same materials as well that they used for mosses on his costume, and all the same paints. And that's kind of how it was with a lot of these characters. I think another really good example is Spycore, played by James Apps, who there he is, bless him.
There we go.
Was another tall stunt performer who he was, I think James, about 6'7", 6'6", very athletic, very muscular guy already, and we sculpted his suit again from modeling clay over a full body plaster of Paris live cast, and we separated everything. We sculpted it as a whole, and then we separate it all into different components. Again, we had like upper body, lower body, feet, hands, silicone facial makeup, foam latex cowl, and then the big head scratchy thing with this character with the spikes, obviously. They were all modeled in modeling clay, and then we molded them all separately. I think we 3D printed them, made molds and duplicates, and we had varying different sizes going up from however big up to, they went up to about 40 centimeters, I think, in length. So the big thing for us was he was doing a lot of stunt action sequences. He was going to come in contact with other performers. He was going to be hurled into walls, flung up in the ceiling, all kinds of things. What the hell are we going to make these spikes out of?
Yeah.
They can't injure James, and they can't injure other performers, and they can't wobble as well. So it's like, how are we going to do this? So the smaller spikes you see at the lower part of his chest there, going so far up, I think we got to about that length, and we made them out of hollow slush latex that we kind of cast out of these little plaster molds, and they were glued directly onto the suit. And then anything larger than that, we worked with a fabrication company called Stitches and Glue, which we've worked an awful lot with over the years on shows like Stranger Things and The Last of Us. And they do a lot of puppets. They do a lot of work for theatre shows, and they do quite large 3D printed models. And they did How to Train Your Dragon, the live action film as well. And we spoke with them, and they were saying, have you thought about some kind of flexible 3D printed material? And we trialed various 3D printed filaments that we could 3D print these spines, but they would be hollow, so they would only have a wall of a couple of mil. So they'd be hollow, lightweight, printed in this 3D material, which was flexible. So the great thing is they didn't wobble, and if James ran into somebody, they would just bend. And so we ended up 3D printing a lot of these spines, spikes, and permanently adhered them to the suits. Again, he had a couple of duplicate suits because you needed a backup should anything happen. And the same with his head. I think some of these spikes were 3D printed, some were foam latex. So it's a real mix of materials. But going from using some of the techniques we used for the spikes on this character, we also developed for some of the characters which had horns as well. So one of our other main characters was Goatman, played by Hafthor Bjornsson, and we had to paint Hafthor from head to toe in a red. It was an alcohol-based gel that we used, and red is actually notoriously quite a translucent pigment, because the more you try to make it opaque, if you use white or paler products, it becomes pink. So to get that vibrancy of red, it's a fairly translucent ink that we use. And Hafthor is covered head to toe in tattoos, naturally. So our team, it was a 4-man team, which had to base out and paint out Hafthor's entire body with a flesh tone paint first to get rid of these tattoos. And then they rolled on and sponged on this red ink all over. And then they had to go in with airbrushes and brushes to do highlight and shadow to pull out all the muscle tone as well. And then they spattered various inks and colours over the top to give a nice camouflagey, natural texture to the skin. But we used the same flexible 3D printed material to create Hafthor's horns. So he's got silicone prosthetics from just above the eyebrows up over the top of his head, over onto the back of his scalp. Hafthor used to shave his head every day. In fact, he used to use a hair removal product every day to get rid of his hair all over his body so we could paint him. But we started off with like a rigid 3D printed, what we call a skull cap, which kind of comes down to the top of the forehead and around the ears, around the back of the scalp. And that had 2 sockets in, which housed magnets. And then his silicone prosthetics glued over the top of that, leaving those sockets open. And then we had these 3D printed horns with magnets on the reverse of those, which clicked on every day. And the beauty of that was, again, if you caught anybody, they'd just ping off, and lightweight, and we could just remove them in between shots, and he didn't have to wear the horns all day. And then he's got little foam latex ears and contact lenses, dentures, silicone gloves, foam latex hooves. It's bless the poor guy. We really put him. He's a very tall guy, and I'll say it was a team of 4 people, 4 artists headed by Duncan Jarman, who was like the sort of head of the team, who sculpted Hafthor's prosthetics as well. And we both worked with Hafthor on Game of Thrones as well years ago. Played the Mountain on Game of Thrones, so we knew him very well. So that was kind of a big challenge with this maker was not only the horns, the prosthetics, but it was the body paint was a real challenge with Goatman. And as with a lot of these characters, the body art was quite a big part of the process. And I guess the other character that we used a lot of body art on was Sam C. Wilson as Trapjaw, um, which was a real. Trapjaw was one of my favourite characters because this was a combination of lots of approaches, from prosthetics to body art, body appliances, and 3D printed soft prop helmet as well. That we spoke uh, originally with the costume department as to who would be providing this, and I think because it had to work very much in conjunction with the makeup and it had to be articulated, we decided to take this on as a department, and we did small scale maquettes to start off with before Sam was cast in the role, and we got the look signed off. They cast Sam. We 3D scanned Sam, and then we have a wonderful artist here called Pat Fode, a sculptor and prosthetic artist, who he sculpted the prosthetics for Sam, but he also modelled his helmet as well. And we separated the helmet from the prosthetics, and we 3D scanned the helmet, molded and processed the prosthetics. But we took the sculpt. I wouldn't say it's crude, but it was like the hand sculpted helmet, and 3D artist Harvey Smith manipulated it in 3D software to make it perfectly symmetrical and hard edged, and he also slightly reworked it so everything would be pivoted and joined correctly. And then we 3D printed and molded it, and we cast it out in a semi flexible rubber, a urethane. Which was then artworked up to look metallic. And it was two separate pieces. It was a jaw, which had like a chin cup, which sat on Sam's jaw. And it was on like a kind of an Alice band, which sat around the top of his head and attached to a ball cap. And then the helmet went on and attached with magnets just around the center of those discs around the ears. And then every time Sam opened his mouth, it just articulated perfectly with his jaw. So it was it's quite a scary one, I think, Trapjaw to get right. Trapjaw was one of my favourite characters as well growing up, and I knew this would probably be a bit of a fan favourite, and so the pressure to get him right was huge. And with all of these characters, I mean, all us and the team wanted to do was just do everybody justice and just do the best possible job we could. So we poured everything into it. We really did, and I think Trapjaw is a good example of something that, I think working again closely with the costume team and Richard Sales guys, those costume elements, everything had to tie together well, the shoulder pieces, the straps, and he had a green screen, he had his arm replaced in it with visual effects in post-production. So he was a lovely marriage of all our departments. Really, really was.
It's just so incredible looking. And I think, kind of like you intimated, like wanting to do it correctly, wanting to get it right so that people are happy with the end result. But also, coming from your own perspective as Trapjaw specifically as your favorite character, and just getting to work on that and getting it right and making it look so cool. And I mean, I said it before, everything just looks awesome. Like it looks great. Like these are these big, ugly monsters that we loved as kids, and
I think that's you've hit it on the head, really, the nail on the head. And I think there is like this awful sense. No, there's this incredible sense of responsibility to do everything correctly, and there was this real overwhelming fear of how is the film going to be received, and I think. I know there's quite a mixed bag of critical, reception from it, but I think for me, what I'm so pleased about is that it was really made with so much love and heart, and Travis really wanted to target the original audience of the original IP, and everything I've seen has been overwhelmingly positive as to everybody thinks who was a big fan of Master of the Universe and He-Man in the 80s just thinks that Travis has done things correctly, and we couldn't hope for anything more, really. I think there's always a fear, of, especially if you join an IP which is already incredibly successful, how is it going to be received by the public? And we've had it in projects in different ways in the past. When we joined Stranger Things, we joined quite late. We joined on season 4 to create the character Vecna, and it already had this massive following. So there was a lot of anticipation as to how was he going to be received, and it was the same with the show The Last of Us, which already had this huge video game following.
Mm-hmm.
So to recreate the makeup effects from that franchise was again, how's this going to go? So we've been very fortunate and very lucky, and we count our lucky stars all the time, just to how we ever got involved with Masters of the Universe. It's like it's a dream. It really is a dream. We're very, very grateful.
I think it's one of those things that's just so special. Obviously, like you were saying, a lot of the fans who cherish this brand as kids, and are now, grown up like we are, being able to finally have this movie in front of us after, so many years of false starts and canceled projects. And I think it just kind of became a running joke in the fan community that, we'll believe that there's a movie when we see it, when we're watching the end credits. And
Yeah.
we're here now. It's happened, and to see it just realized so beautifully and so, true to the original designs and things like that, it is something that's very special. Obviously the 87 film exists, and I have affection for that movie as well. Like, I'm of the opinion that, I love He-Man, so anytime there's more He-Man on the screen, I'm happy. And so it doesn't look like the toys, it doesn't look like the cartoon, or anything like that, but it's still He-Man, and so it still carries that affection, with it.
Yeah.
But there is something special about this new movie when they look like they did when we were kids, and we know who these characters are, and
it's the tone.
It's so cool.
I think it's that fine line of it's science fiction, it's fantasy, it's drama, it's action, but there's so much humor in there as well. And I think that's the cartoon had that humor. I mean,
it did.
God, it's like Skeletor was so goofy, he really was, but that's what made him so compelling. And I think Jared's nailed it. He really, he nailed the performance, and I think it's that tone. It's like one of my favourite scenes in the film. It actually, I think a lot of people have commented, is our heroes right at the end on the bridge in Eternia.
Yeah.
Laughing, and it's that used to happen so many times at the end of the episodes, and it's like, oh my God, there was so many daft little. But I love little comical moments like Cringer and Beastman fighting, and Cringer kind of looking up over at Nicholas, and it was just lovely little. I mean, there were a few really lovely comical moments in the original script as well, and I think Travis has just done well to balance, the nods of humor and the nods of action, and it is exciting, it's thrilling, but he's said himself in interviews, this is the main approach was to make sure that Eternia was beautiful, colourful. It's like all eye candy. It's like everything's vibrant, everything's rich, and it's like I think they totally got it, not spot on. So it's just wonderful to be part of something which everybody was on the same page, and I think you really, as a production, as everybody needs to be striving for the same goal, and I think everybody worked tirelessly to do it in this tone, and I think it's really paid off. I think it's really paid off.
Yeah, definitely. I could talk about this kind of stuff all day. Like, this is just so fun listening to your stories and the processes that you went through to create some of these characters. Back you were talking about Moss Man. I think it's so great that that toy is famous for having the actual flocking on it. The fact that you guys actually flocked the costume, the for the movie version of it, like he's actually flocked just like the toy was. Like, that's so fun. I love
Absolutely. It. Well, a lot of it was like the first. I've got about 10 minutes, I think. Actually, I'm going to have to make a move. But I think the first tests that we did were about maybe a month, maybe just over a month before we started filming. We've never tested as mentally on a project that we did on Masters of the Universe, and I think it's because it had that merchandise section of it that it was obviously tied to Mattel,
Right.
and would be promoting a toy line at the same time as the film. So we had to get all our stuff approved, and we had to get everything pre-tested, and they had to scan all of our characters so they could then start modeling the action figures. And the first test we did, I think the first week, there was a day where we had, I think, Goatman, Pig Boy, and Spike all on one day. And it was the first time we saw them all in their prosthetics. We went down onto the set, and the costume department dressed them in their each little tents on set, these little easy up tents. And they'd be coming out, and they'd have the loincloths on their armor, and we'd go, oh my God, to see it all come together was incredible. And there were characters we weren't involved with, but I was standing chatting with Richard from costume, and Mechaneck just stepped out of the tent, and it was like, oh my, it was the first time I'd seen him, and it was so accurate and spot on. And I just thought it's an adult size action figure. So it was that joy that it brought to all of us, I think, as genuine He-Man fans growing up in our childhood, was probably the biggest gift it could have given us. So it's it's surreal, and it's just, I only wish my mum was around, because she would be in awe to see that we got to recreate Eternia and its inhabitants. I think she would have absolutely loved it. So from a company perspective, and our department, our team, Sarah and I are so proud of our team, and our team say all the time that it's probably, in our 15 years or so as a company, it's probably the most creative project we've done to date. And we used every tool in the toolbox and did everything from spiky, slimy, horny, mossy, name it, we did it all. So yeah, it's just been a big bucket list of ticks, really. So it's been incredible.
That's awesome. Well, I want to make sure to highlight, I think your work speaks for itself, and we can see all these fantastic designs and the work that you did. We can see it easily on the screen, but I just want to make sure that as a fan, I thank you for, you and your team, for the work you've done on this, and for bringing these characters to life in such a cool way. It really is fantastic, and it really is special, and I think it's just, I think that kind of that final scene of the movie where they're all kind of in their classic costumes, and doing the laughing and stuff like that, and then the music kicks in when Adam runs off to transform. There's no better way to describe how that movie made me feel, than that moment there. Just that pure nostalgic rush. Like I couldn't stop smiling, and I even got a little weepy eyed about it, But that all, it's all made possible. You guys, I don't know how it all works. You guys are doing literal magic with these things. So well done. And thank you.
Coming from a huge fan as yourself, it's like, that for us is the goal, really, just to get that kind of seal of approval and appreciation. So it's thank you. It's I'm just glad we didn't screw it up anyway. Thank you so much anyway.
Absolutely. Well, before we sign off, where can people find you and your company online if they want to check you out?
I think probably the most up to date kind of area to find would probably be Instagram. I sort of update a page sort of regularly. So there's Masters stuff is going up there as we speak, and we have other projects in the pipeline at the moment I can't talk about. So, but that gives you quite a good kind of visual history of what we've done as a company. And we have an old website which is about 5-10 years old, which hasn't been touched for ages, and we've got a brand new website which will probably go live in about maybe within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
Be adding to more and more over the coming months. And that's BGFX at bgfx.co.uk. And then I think my Instagram tag, I think he's just like Barrie Gower, one word, Barrie with an IE. And
Yes.
that's my handle. So there we go.
Awesome. And I'll include all of those links to the website and to your Instagram page. I'll include all those in the video description when I upload it.
Thank you.
But yeah, well, thank you for sitting down with me today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, Colt. Absolutely brilliant. Lovely to meet you. And
You
we
as
should
well.
keep in touch anyway.
Definitely. And for everybody out there watching, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Good journey.